All right, guys, back with you again today for something I've been planning now for over a month. This started back on June 1st when I first got this motor out of the trailer right here. Now, I've got to cover it up because I'm trying to do a little reveal thing going on. If you notice, I'm doing this video in front of my old 1943 GMC CKW or CCKW, whatever. I can't remember the name of it, but GMC military truck, which I treasure. I got this when I was 18 years old and restored it back then, and we still drive it today. It's a great truck, all original motor, 270 and all that stuff. But anyway, so what I'm doing today is what I want to dub a 250th anniversary celebration motor for our great country. And what better way to do that than being surrounded by American iron? Everything in here is American iron nearly. But this is a military version, Wisconsin, that I have had for 30 years. And for the last few years, we've been wanting to get it out of storage and run it through the shop and do a restoration on it. But just other motors came in front of it, stuff like that. So the story behind this motor was, the reason why I've had it for 30 years is I got it in Michigan when I was 16 years old. And was up there visiting my family. And on the way up, when we go up there, we would stop by the factory in Dyer, Tennessee is where the factory was. And I'd visit with all the Wisconsin guys up there, and I'd take a plant tour like I did every couple of years. And the last part of the tour, we'd go to the paint booth, and they would let me load up on decals, the safety decals and the name tags, the white Wisconsin tags that they had. And my whole goal back then was to make motors look new, like they had just came off the assembly line. So if I'd get a motor from pretty much any era, I mean, it didn't take anything to make them look like a new motor because they were still built exactly the same in the 90s. So I would clean them up and rebuild them if needed. If not, then I would just do a clean up and paint them black and try to detail some of the parts on them, because at the factory they just paint the whole thing black, spark plug wires and all. But and I put the new safety decals on them in the same places that they did the new motors and the new name tags and stuff like that. And I was young, so just some stupid things I used to do back then. Now looking back, I wish I would have done that. But when you're 16 years old, you think you know everything. So that's just the way it works out. But while we were up in Michigan, my dad and I went out riding around, and I was just looking for some motors and stuff like that, just to see if we can look at anything. And we went to this old rental shop, and I walked in and asked the guy, I said, "Hey, you guys have any Wisconsins?" And he said, "Yeah, I got two back there in the back." And I, "Will you sell them?" He said, "Yeah, I'll sell them." So we go back in the back, and there is a military MVG4D 37 horsepower engine sitting on a shelf. And man, I was drawn to it. I mean, it's a military motor, so obviously back then I liked military things. So we went up and looked at it, and this thing had all kinds of gadgets on it, stuff I had never seen before, And so we struck a deal on it, and my dad was like, "How are we going to get this home?" I said, I had a job at the time, and I said, "Well, let's go rent a little U-Haul trailer, enclosed trailer, and we'll put it in there and we'll take it home." He's like, "All right, whatever." So that's what we did. Well, whenever I got home, I was still pumped up on coming from the factory, and seeing all the new motors. And I don't know what I was thinking, but I decided to go ahead and remove all the military stuff off this motor, the most that I could, and paint it black. And this thing is loaded out, guys. It has so many weird things on it that you'll never see in the manual. And I'll show you right here. So this motor, this is an MVG4D manual that I've always had. And mind you, like I said, I was young. There's a lot of things I didn't even notice about this motor. The special things about it being military. If you look here, this motor, here's the open version, here's the power unit. It's got a military oil filter on it, and it has a pulley takeoff on the front for a generator. It's got a radio shielded mag, spark plug wires, all that stuff. It's got a flanged exhaust on it. Just a lot of cool things. And of course, it's painted olive drab, the Vietnam era green. And it was brand new. It was surplus. Now this motor is rated at, so here's the funny thing. So I'm trying to find these specs on the run. I should have had this looked up already, but this is going to be a long video anyway, so if you don't like all this blah blah blah, you can fast forward it. But there's a lot of history here, a lot of neat stuff. That this is going to be something you don't see every day. So this motor has a 3 7/16 bore by 4-inch stroke. Now, if you know what a MVG4D is, it's 154 cubic inches. It's 3.5-inch bore by 4-inch stroke. And I just assumed that this motor was just a civilian model with a bunch of garb put on top of it. You know, I didn't think it was really anything that special, even though I had the book back then and I read it all the time. I just passed over stuff. The horsepower rating on this motor right here at 2200 RPM is 34.5 horsepower. At 2400, it's 36 horsepower. So that's pretty much right in line with the factory motor. I never thought anything of it. Never noticed the bore size on this thing. Never. I think I got it right here just to confirm in the manual. It's in here somewhere. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just on my tag. So anyways, this motor is I guess what you would call an Arctic version motor made for cold weather operation. And the stuff this thing has on it is crazy. And I mean, back then I was blown away with all the stuff it had on it. So here's the original tag. Now I remade this tag, and this stays with the motor, but the tag is on the machine over there. I don't know if you can see this, but right there it says 3 7/16 by 4. And this is a pretty cool tag because it gives you more details. So right here, it's got the build date, December of 70. Right here, now look at this. This is the horsepower rating. You probably can't see it. 25.9. Okay? The book says 36. This says 25.9 at 2200 RPM. I've never noticed that. And right there it says MVG4D. Never noticed the bore size. Never noticed the horsepower. Because what I did when I got home, I ripped this tag off and I put a new style tag on it, took everything off, and painted it black instead of leaving it alone. Don't ask me why. Well, I know why, because I was dumb. But so that's where it was. So why I had this motor, when I got it all done, blacked out, I took the oil filter relocator off. I left the radio shielded mag because I didn't have any other way to make it run. So I left that on there, but I painted it all black. I had a stainless steel hood made for it because the original hood was beat to shreds. I don't know what happened to it, but it was beat up really bad. But, you know, this is back in 96, you know. That was whenever all the Lincoln welders had a fabricated stainless hood on them. You know, that was just a cool thing to do. And it does look good. It looks really good. So I ended up keeping that hood. I ended up using that. But this thing has an airflow adjuster on the front of it. It has gauges for days on it. It's got an oil pan heater. It has a hot air intake to come off the top of the motor to suck it in. But you can plug this thing into a 110 extension cord and you can warm this sucker up. And I guess it was made for minus weather. It's retarded how this thing is made. And we're getting there. We'll get there in a minute. So anyways, I painted it all black, did all that stuff, and I took it outside and set it up on a little stand that I had built for it. Cranked it up, 24 volt starter, so I took the starter off and I put a 12 volt starter on there so I could crank it. And just let it run. I'd come home after work, crank the motor up, listen to it run, dump a lot of gas in it because that thing just sucks gas like crazy. And I'd have to gravity feed it because there is no fuel pump on this motor from the factory. There's a blank for it, but it was made to be ran with a pump, a fuel pump for whatever it was on, because even on the back of the motor has a big fuel filter with a pressure regulator on it. And of course I took that off too. Yeah. But anyway, so that being said, it was set out in the backyard and I keep it covered up. I go out there and I crank it up, listen to it run for about an hour or so. The hour meter that it has on it showed 80 hours when I got it, and it worked. And the guy told me it was surplus. It was military surplus. And the shaft on the takeoff looks like it never had anything slid on it or clamped down to it. I mean, it's just like they just kind of ran it to play with it. I don't know. And that might be what he did. But anyways, it was out there running, and I was 20 hours into it, and I can document this because the hour meter stopped at 100, and something popped inside the motor. And when it did, it went through all the gears, and it made a horrendous whining gear racket. It was terrible, terrible. It broke my heart, you know, at that point I was 17 years old. And, you know, that's a pretty big deal for somebody that age back then. And so I went out there and I tore the whole face of it down outside, and sure enough, it boogered every single gear in that thing. And I found the piece that had broke. It was a little, the spring retainer on the camshaft, the plunger. Somebody had put a cap on it. I don't know why, because this motor had been taken apart. There was gasket seal, orange gasket seal, back in the day, on the timing gear cover. And I guess they figured that they needed that cap. Maybe they found it laying around. They said, well, maybe it goes here. I don't know. But there is not a cap like that on the camshaft spring gear, on the thrust plunger on a Wisconsin. But I found both halves of it perfect. Well, not both halves perfect because they weren't into the gears. But anyways, I found the problem. So I ordered a brand new set of gears for it. Came back, started putting it back together. And as a 17-year-old would do, with all his trying to keep his cars running and everything else, I lost interest in it. So I covered it up with a tarp, walked away from it, and it sat out there for probably months, literally outside. And whenever I left my parents' house, I had another shop. I loaded it all up, took it to that new shop. It has stayed in that shop for a few years with metal dust getting all over it, overspray paint from other projects, things like that. Slowly taking little pieces off of it through the years, you know, just small things. Just really stupid. From that shop, moved to my other shop. Same thing, got pushed in the corner. Years of fabrication in that shop. Things getting dusty and nasty and painted on. And then from that shop to the 18-wheeler trailer, where it stayed in storage out here for another 10 years. And then finally, we bring it into this shop. And I was talking to Wisconsin Engine Boy up in Ohio about, I was, you know, wanting to bring this motor in, and I sent him a picture of the data tag. And I can't see hardly without my glasses on. And this tag, I keep all my tags. If I do remove a tag, I keep them in my toolbox in a certain drawer. And I sent him a picture of this tag just to get some specs on it, just kind of get an idea. I had forgotten, it's been so long, that the date is right here on the tag. And he texted me back whenever I sent him a picture of it. He said, how about that bore size? And I'm like, what are you talking about? You know, so I looked at it and I'm like, 3 7/16, not 3 1/2. What is that all about? And that's whenever I went and looked at the horsepower rating. I'm like, man, what's going on? This is some kind of unicorn motor. And I thought I knew a lot about this motor. So of course, I already had this out, because whenever I go through a process on a motor here at the shop, I always go and find my books on it, and I'll lay in bed at night and read it and study it, you know, and what I'm going to do next. So, man, I dived into it. So the only thing I can figure on this motor, obviously it was built for the Arctic, for Alaska or some other cold weather base. The VG4Ds were usually used for Gorman fuel transfer pumps, air compressors, refrigeration units, anything stationary. And of course this motor has a clutch on it, so they could kind of do anything they wanted with it. And there's no other information out there. I can't find any cold weather motor versions of the MVG4D. I can't find anything in the books. I can't find, I had Wisconsin Engine Boy run the spec number. It doesn't really say anything about it on that. It shows the motor, I believe he said, but it doesn't have any specs, you know. So anyways, when I got it into the shop, June 1st, sprayed it all down, brought it in. It was destroyed. I mean, it was not destroyed, but it was terrible. I mean, it had rust all over the face of it. The timing gear covers were exposed to the elements for years. Of course, all the military pieces are still at my dad's old job somewhere. He uses it for his place and storage now. So every time I go back to find an old part, I got to go on a treasure hunt to find this stuff. And man, I was like, this is really bad. So I took it apart. Of course, there was rust in the cylinders. Evidently, it stayed outside longer than I thought it did. Stuck valves. The inside was pretty clean, but it still had dust and surface coming into it because of the face being off. You know, there's holes in the face and behind the timing gears. So I ended up tearing this motor completely down. I mean, I had to take it, pistons out, the whole 9 yards. And had to completely clean everything and polish everything back up. I found all the gears that I had bought back in 1997. The gears were even dated 97 on them with the month. That's lucky. I mean, because it was 97 when it blew up. I went and bought a set of gears. I guess they were hot off the press, and there's a matching set of gears. I found all those at my dad's house. I found the military filters, the hoses, all the little trinkets, pieces and parts, the hose clamps. Everything the same was missing. So the only thing that I do not have that I did on this motor was the oil pan on the motor has a heating element, has 5 elements in it that plug in, and it's got a thermostat on the other side of the block. And below that, the heating element section, it's sealed off, and there's a casting on the bottom that bolts to it, well, it's casted to it with a pan on it, with hoses that hook to it, I guess for hot water circulation. I don't know, maybe when it was on a military base, maybe they had a hose with hot water they would hook to all their machines to circulate them. I don't know, but it had hoses, water-style hoses with heat sinks built inside the pan to, I guess, warm the oil up. If you didn't have electricity, you could use another running motor or something, a water-cooled motor to do it. I don't know. It's all a mystery. So if anybody out there knows anything about a military VF MVG4D Wisconsin for cold weather operation, please let me know. I mean, it's just, I doubt it. But if somebody does know something, some history behind this version of this motor, that'd be really cool to kind of get some clarity of how the heating system worked and stuff like that. And kind of where they were planned on going, you know, where they were going to be deployed to, if they ever were deployed. So, without further ado, that's enough of the long story. Let's get this sucker uncovered real quick. What do you say? There she is. Okay, so where to start? Okay, so here is, of course, the external filter, military spec. I got the filter for it at the parts store. It's still just a regular Fram oil filter inside. Here's my remade tag. You can see some of the writing on it, and MVG4D, all that stuff. Okay, so here's the biggest thing, man. So you got your takeoff pulley for a generator or alternator on the front. There's the original tag. Okay. There's your plug-in for your heater. Now the coolest thing of all, you can regulate the airflow. It has little blades that come down on each side of the banks right here with linkage on it. And you can move this thing. That's all the way off. You can come in, regulate it a little bit anywhere you want it, or you can open it all the way. There's wide open right there. Now this gauge is just in here because I don't have a 24-volt generator on it yet or alternator, so I just put a gauge in there to fill a hole. That's kind of what they had done before. On off button, choke, throttle, original start switch, this original plug, just cleaned everything up the best I could. This original tachometer. I've got 102 hours on it now. This is the oil temperature gauge that shows the actual engine oil temperature. I guess that's how they kind of regulated it during cold weather. You notice this tube goes around the top and comes back into the power unit cover. That's to suck the warm air off the motor. Keep it warm. Here we got the two-piece exhaust flange, which I believe in that book from what I read, if you want to lift it, you would unbolt this right here, and they had a hook that would hook to it to balance the motor. And I guess if they had other exhaust options, they could just bolt it to it real quick. I don't know. You get down here, here is the heating elements section. So here's the elements that keep the oil pan warm. And it heats it up pretty quick too. I've already plugged it in. It always worked. That was not an issue. Plug it in and it stops at 140. The temperature gauge will come up a little bit past 140 and it'll stop because there's a thermostat on the other side that keeps it regulated. It's got an oil pressure gauge down here. This hose right here goes up to the top of the filter. It returns back down to the governor, which I can't see it right here. But when you see the radio show the spark plugs, these are original plugs. Everything's Morse radio mag. This is your other kill switch right here. Kill it. Of course, it's got the one on the front. And this thing is just so cool, man. Now behind this panel, let me get a light. So behind the front face panel, there's a lot going on back here. And this thing's almost, I'd hate to take this thing apart, guys. I'm telling you, it takes so long to put this thing together with the roof off. It doesn't look like much in here, but it's like a Duramax Chevrolet in here, dude. There is so much crap packed in here. And then you got your air baffling little thing right here. You got to keep it clear from everything so it can go up and down. But this is all the original switches. Everything that I could use originally, it's in there. Marble Chevrolet carburetor. Now, there's no fuel pump on this motor. That's factory. It's the way it came. There's just a blank down there. This side you got, that's your oil temperature right there. That's your thermostat. And you can adjust that thermostat if you want to make the oil hotter. Right for clutch. You got the 24-volt starter. And that starter was like brand new when I got it. Of course, I took it off and then I ended up taking it apart. Realized I couldn't do anything with it. So it just sat in that other shop over there, tore down. I found all the pieces, put it all back together. It works great. Brushes, of course, are like brand new. And right now, today, we're going to hand crank it. This thing cranks up really good. Because I don't feel like rigging up 2 batteries to crank it. So I did that, of course, when I first got it going. All right, so back on this side. Let's see if I can get some light in there. And that's the way the spark plug wires are routed. They're clamped down right there. And that's all factory routing. You can see here's one of the baffles right here that go up and down. Let me see if I can do it so you can see what's going on here. So that's shutting it off. It goes down to shut it off. That's wide open. My little, has a retired flag out of my yard. I used that on my base. I made this base for it so I can roll this thing around. All right, so another cool thing is on the clutch right here, it's dated also it's like 1/6 of 70. This motor was built in December of 70. You see how pristine this shaft is. Looks like nothing's ever been on it. And my favorite part back here is the fuel filter. So right now I'm triple filtered right now. I just got a gravity feed going to it. Whenever I put this thing on something, I'm going to run an electric fuel pump on it like it had in the 24-volt system. But until then, I just gravity feed it. Now this right here was painted yellow when I got it. That's the way it was. And it's a sediment bowl, but this is actually a pressure regulator. And it works. It actually still works. And there's a diaphragm up here. And it's got a little check ball in it, stuff like that. So this is after the fuel filter. I guess it could catch sediment if it wants to, but it regulates the pressure before it hits the carburetor. And then here I got the military number. This is the actual spec number for this motor. The military spec. Kind of camouflage there. So yeah, I'm kind of digging the stainless hood. This paint is Vietnam era spec paint. It's a color match to some pieces down here, like on the bottom. When I took this motor apart, it was never touched by the sun. These pieces were actually painted separately from the factory, and they assembled it. I mean, you could tell on the build that they really did actually use a lot of government money to build this motor. You know what I mean? This thing was way overbuilt. And then I got pictures that show the pistons that I pulled out. The pistons are military pistons. They have their own part number, and they're actually completely different than the factory piston. And in the picture that's coming up, I'll show you the difference between the pin bosses on them, and it's got a thrust face on the piston. It has 2 compression rings and 2 oil regulating rings. Very weird looking piston, but the pin bosses underneath the piston are super thick. Crazy thing. And the valve train. Now the book tells you about the valve train, and it says about the pistons too. And I'm pretty sure the piston, it's commonality between, these are all military spec parts, and it says it, it's got the numbers, military spec numbers on every part. But one thing that's really cool on this motor is the valve train. It has its own lifters, and it has its own valve rotators and its own spec valves, and they're military stamped and everything. But on the valves, you can put your finger on them when they're raised, and you can rotate them with your fingertip both directions, and they're on all 8 valves. Every valve, you can spin it like a turntable, just like that, smooth as ice. Never seen a rotator like that. Wisconsin only puts rotators on the exhaust valves, and they just kind of come up and they turn just a little bit. They turn, and they only turn one direction, which is fine. But these will turn infinitely both directions with ease. So just a lot of cool little actual military things going on here. Now let's try to get this sucker cranked up. Alright, so it'll warm up for a minute. this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed everything here. If you know anything about this motor on the version that it is for the cold weather, please leave it in the comments or just reach out to me somehow. Anyway, it's been a fun build, been a good time, it's been a lot of pressure to get it done for the 250th anniversary, but we made it. So I'm going to shut her down and we'll get on to some pictures next. Gotta get that click in there. All right, see you next time.